everybody. We'll get episode 11 started here in a second.
Just 1 second while I get them in here. There's Will, and there is Adam. What's going on, guys?
Hanging in there. How about you?
I'm doing good. I'm still a little tired, but just trying to get through all the things. That time change really did me dirty yesterday, but yeah, I'm ready to talk about everything else that happened in the show choir world. Will, how are you?
Um, I think similar to Adam, I'm hanging in there. I've got a blanket wrapped around me. It's 60 like 3 degrees out, and here I am just humiliated with it. I'm so fragile. I just have a blanket wrapped around me. But you know, um, like you said, the time change is always the worst show choir hangover of the year. I never competed on the time change weekend, but boy, do I feel for everybody who did. Adam, I don't think we're gonna get around to this during the regular show. So, how were your experiences at Lawrence Central?
Well, I'll tell you, it was probably our longest comp of the year. Nowhere near what happened at Wheaton, but it was a late one for us. It was a fun weekend.
Sweet.
Yeah, and speaking of Wheaton, Ethan and I are going to be co-hosting a live stream right after this one. We're going to be co-hosting the Choral Classic recap stream. It's going to take however long it takes, similar to the competition. We don't know how long it's going to take. We promise it won't go till 3:30. We can promise that much. But besides that, we're really looking forward to it. But for now, this is Show Choir Nation. This is the premiere podcast of the Homeroom Show Choir Network. This is episode number 11, which every week it gets crazier as the numbers keep getting higher and higher and higher. So I am William. I am the editor-in-chief of Homeroom Show Choir. To my top is Ethan. He's the head honcho, the unique overlord of Homeroom Show Choir. And then to my other side of the screen is Adam. He is our video guy. He does a wonderful job with that. So it is late March, and while Iowa may have checked out already for the season, well, it's not late March, it's kind of like
Yeah.
mid-March, kind of the
Yeah.
Iowa March. For show choir season, it's kind of late March. Iowa is pretty much checked out of the show choir season already. We got a couple smaller competitions coming up this weekend, but then that's it. A lot of circuits kind of finishing up this weekend or getting very close to the finish line. Nebraska with their final competition of the year this weekend. Wisconsin with their final competition of the year this weekend. Mississippi with their final competition of the year this weekend. And so I believe Missouri maybe as well. Maybe one more for Missouri, but I think Battle might have been the last one for them. So we are going to touch on perhaps a couple of those for a little bit, but we do have several circuits that are still very much alive and well. So we are going to head straight into the results from this past weekend. But before we get there, this is a reminder that if you're in the stream right now and you cannot make it for the entire hour, this will be on Spotify and YouTube later tonight. So make sure that if you can't catch the whole thing, or even if you can and you just want to rewatch it, go back on either Spotify or YouTube. So we're going to start in Virginia. And we haven't talked about Virginia very much this year. So we're going to talk about Virginia some. Right off the top here, we're going to talk about the Cosby Titan Tournament of Choirs, the final results from this one, taking home the grand championship with Best Vocals and Best Choreography, John Burroughs Powerhouse. First runner-up with Best Band, Chesterton Sandpipers. Second runner-up, Troy Buchanan Express. Third runner-up, Scranton First Edition. And fourth runner-up, Troy Buchanan Soundwave. Adam, I'll toss this one to you first, straight off the bat. I think there are a grand total of 0 Virginia choirs in these finals. But despite that fact, what can we learn from this?
Well, it's absolutely a trip for Powerhouse. This is like just about the furthest they could go from their home state of California, bringing home both captions though. So I'm sure it feels great. I'm curious if they drove all that way or if they flew. can imagine a bus ride that far would maybe be a little too much, especially with the school week. But Chesterton coming in right behind, above Troy. So that's a big win for them. Both of these groups are terrific. Not in contention with Burroughs, but right below it, very close to each other. Some of the nation's premier groups as well. Scranton coming in above Troy's, bless you, above Troy's Univoice group there. And that's also fantastic to see. Scranton is really your only group that comes and makes noise out of Pennsylvania. And it's terrific to see them out and competing all over the place. And of course, I always applaud when we see a Univoice group make finals. So congrats to Soundwave as well. Oh, that's a prep group. Sorry. That's a prep group. Sorry.
That is a prep group.
My bad.
So real quick before we get to Ethan on this, Adam, you do bring up a very interesting question of whether Burroughs drove or flew. If they drove, it's 39 hours. I would assume that at least the equipment for their set drove out there.
Yep.
I would honestly think that at this point, I mean, with all due respect to Midlothian, Virginia, I don't know if you make a week-long trip out of going to Midlothian, Virginia. So I think the kiddos might have flew, but the equipment, I think, went on the ground. Ethan, what do you see out of this finals?
So Adam touched on it a little bit. John Burroughs came all the way there, and they beat two very solid Midwest programs who've been on the rise pretty recently. I think Chesterton has been constantly growing throughout the past couple of years. It's been really cool to see. The next comp, I think John Burroughs is like in like 37 days or something. I looked at it a little bit ago, and I was like, whoa, that's like a month. That's over a month. That's crazy. But again, that's going to be the big three battle between Burbank, LaSalle, and them. And right now, I mean, again, it's like a month away. But they kind of look, as of right now, I think they're the favorites. So already besting John Burroughs once. I know no one has gone up against Burbank yet, I don't think. Out of the big three, at least. So
no one has gone up against Burbank, period. They haven't competed yet.
Oh, they haven't?
Burbank.
Actually,
Burbank.
They got a win this weekend.
Never mind. We'll talk
right?
about that later on. Yeah, but no one's bested Burbank yet this year. So
that big three matchup will be one. Oceanside's always like the last competition of the year, so we always go out with a big bang. So that's one that we're going to keep our eyes on. Chesterton, I think they're having one of the quietest solid seasons ever. They haven't gotten a placement lower than second, and in the state of Indiana, that's hard to do. So congrats to them. I think they have one comp left. I think it's Herscher. I think it's in Illinois. They're at Herscher.
That'd be next weekend. Yeah.
And I think they're going up against a slew of Illinois choirs. So they have a chance to get another GC there and place top two. And like you said a little bit ago, Will, it's the time of the year where we say goodbye to a lot of choirs, and it's kind of sad to see we won't be talking about this choir for a while, any longer until maybe the end of the year awards or something like that. But I do want to give a shout out to Troy Buchanan. Excellent season. They didn't go up against the toughest choirs ever, but they did have a really solid season in the Missouri circuit and going up into Illinois too. It's sad to see a talented group leave the circuit, like you say, Iowa's done, Nebraska's closing up. Troy had a wonderful season, and congrats to those seniors for sure.
All right. Yeah, I think that's just about all you can say about the mixed finals. One note I will add is that Burroughs is already at 3 wins for the season. And so for most groups, you're like, what do you mean they're already at 3 wins? Well, for the big California groups that we think of as not really starting until March, when Burroughs actually started midway through February, they're already at 3 wins this year. And one has come against LaSalle and one has come against Chesterton and Troy. So a very good resume for Powerhouse so far this season. They did a 3-group women's finals on Friday night. So in the women's finals, John Burroughs Sound Sensations took home best vocals and best choreography. Douglas S. Freeman Harmony in Motion was second with best band, and the Chesterton Drifters were third. And I just want to say a big congrats to Douglas S. Freeman. This is a school that only fields a women's group. It's kind of in that Tupelo Synergy mold, except they're much less visible because Virginia never runs a combined finals. They would always run a separate finals, so they never get to go up against the mixed groups. But I just wanted to give a shout out to Harmony in Motion there. We're going to move on to Ohio with the Fairfield Crystal Classic, the large final results out of this one. Marysville Swingers Unlimited taking home the win, best vocals, best choreography, and best band. Loveland by Request, first runner-up. Olentangy Keynote, second runner-up. Cloverhill New Dimensions, third runner-up. Twinsburg Great Expectations, fourth runner-up. Robert C. Byrd Vocal Intensity, fifth runner-up. Ethan, I will start with you on this one. Marysville finishes their season 5 for 6 and just a horde of choirs below them. What do we got?
Marysville this year was one of the most successful choirs of the year. The only groups they lost to were Carmel and Brandon, who came up from the South. So they had an amazing year. Closing it out was 5 wins. They beat groups like Naperville North, Pequea, Beaver Creek, Wheaton North, Findlay, Solon, Loveland, and Clover Hill. Yeah, so they had a great season this year, and I think they kind of went under the radar a lot, being in the Ohio scene, and but they had a fantastic year. Something that made me laugh when I was doing a little research before this. Loveland made me laugh a little bit because they're in a really impressive second place streak right now, and it's so satisfying to look at all those twos in a row. Like it's like it just is what it is, you know. It's just one of those. You look at their page. It's like 2-2-2-2-2. But they had a really early win this season, and I think they're going to close out with a win at their next competition at Fame America. So it's going to go 1, 4 twos in a row, and then a 1. And that's gonna be really, really cool to see on the page. They're having a really solid year. They've gone up against some really good groups. And then small finals. Wow, like Edgewood is having a great year. South Dearborn is always a tough choir. Then you throw Ross in there. Really impressive small finals group here. And shout out to Edgewood for coming out with it.
Adam, before we get to you real quick, Ethan, I am putting you on probation because you said Pequea and not Piqua. And we literally went over that in our Q&A episode on how to say that.
You can mute me. You can mute me for a little bit if you wanted to. Put me
I
5
can't
seconds.
mute you. You're the owner of the stream. I can't.
If you want me to mute myself, I can. It sounds
That's
like I kind of.
Adam, what thoughts do you have before we get too far off the rails this early into the show?
Yeah. Well, Edgewood is Edgewood. Group I saw last year with a really fun show, but coming out on top of South Dearborn is always impressive in that small division. I think it's good to see Marysville come out here, and like you mentioned, I'm sure the colors were really pretty for Loveland, but I know those kids are really hard workers, and from the times I faced their group in person, they're one of the most competitive groups in terms of how dedicated the kids are to walking away with that win. And so I'm sure they'll come. I'm sure they'll come into next week hungry. It's definitely not as pretty as the red might be on showchoir.com. I'm sure they're looking for a little blue there. Olentangy is a group that we saw come up ahead of Marysville for the vocal caption at the start of the season. And it's nice to see Marysville's kind of grown and cemented into place at the top here. And I'll let you talk about this a little more, Will, but I know there was some questions about will Twinsburg and Robert C. Byrd come out on top of the fantastic treble groups here. And they did. So that, again, no easy feat. I'll let you talk a little bit about that there.
Yeah, this competition is super interesting in that they always seem to have just a little bit of a different structure for finals each year. And so for this year, one of the sets of finals was large mixed, middle mixed, and large women's. So there were, I think, 4 groups in large mixed, 4 groups in middle mixed, and 2 women's groups. And the women's groups were Loveland and Olentangy, who, if you're in Ohio, are 2 of the best women's groups because Marysville doesn't have one and Findlay doesn't have one. I think maybe you'd throw them up there with ETC as well.
Yeah.
And here I was. I was thinking, okay, like we'll throw the 4 large mixed choirs in there and then both the women's choirs. Turns out that actually wasn't the case. Huge shout outs to Clover Hill and Twinsburg. Clover Hill skipping out on the Cosby Titan Tournament of Choirs, which was in their backyard, to come 2 states over to Fairfield. So that's just how life works sometimes, I guess. But Clover Hill cashed in with a 4th place finish. They are definitely on the rebounding track. Rachel Snyder left there a couple of years ago. Nicole Whitby, formerly of Voyager Academy, is there. And so that is a huge pickup for them. She's got them going back on the right track. And then Twinsburg, another similar story. Randy Lanou was there for a long time. He left them during COVID. I believe Peter Hampton is the director there now, and it looks like he has got great expectations. Back on track to be where they were before the pandemic. And a huge shout out to Robert C. Byrd as well. This is a group that, being from West Virginia, they're not really in the main Ohio scene, but beating both Loveland, Allure, and Olentangy, the She Notes are big accomplishments. Moving on, we got the Heart of America Nashville competition. This is the first of the Heart of Americas for the year. 6 overall finalists here in the grand championship spot. We've got Franklin Central FC Singers taking home best vocals and best choreo. Wheaton North Flight coming home second with best band. Carroll Magic third. Franklin Central High Voltage fourth. Tupelo Synergy fifth, and Carroll Select Sound sixth. Adam, you're the Indiana guy, and if this didn't say Heart of America Nashville, you would have convinced me that this was a competition in Indiana. What's the read on the results here?
Well, I'll start by saying this. FC Singers is in contention for being, in my opinion, one of the best groups in the country of the year. Fantastic show design, always great vocals, and they brought a new style of choreography to the table this year. They have a little bit of a change in choreographers, and their movement is a little more contemporary, a little more lyrical. So you've got some really, really great artistry involved there. Wheaton North is always one of the premier groups from Illinois. Cassie Krause backing up a great vocal sound, as well as usually some great choreo. I believe April did it alone this year. And Carroll also, one of the groups that unfortunately just has so many tough comps, but is really also fantastic. And then I know the women's division was, for some people, a bit of a surprise. High Voltage coming out on top of Tupelo, and both are really, really fantastic groups. I think High Voltage has a unique sound for a women's group, and also a really fun show. So my read on it would be that it was a good weekend for Franklin Central.
Ethan, what do you got?
I think this was a really cool competition because it only had 3 headliners for large mix, and yet we're still talking about it. You know, it was one of those competitions where all 3 of those choirs are insanely good, and we have to talk about this competition. And plus, HOA always puts on amazing events. I love seeing all the Instagram stories from FC Seniors as well as Wheaton North and how their trip has gone. So it's been cool to see how they've been walking around Nashville and Grand Ole Opry and all that stuff. But big win from Franklin Central. You can correct me, but are they undefeated besides their one loss to Carmel?
Yes, other than that close loss to Carmel, they are undefeated.
Yeah, so they're having an amazing year, and I think they're going up against Center Grove in the upcoming weeks. So that's gonna be and they're, of course, Center Grove. We'll get to talking about them in a little bit. They're red hot right now. But
well,
like
not red hot, but
yeah. But, Franklin Central, like you said, is one of the top choirs in the country, and you can never count them out of any competition. They came out and showed it against some solid choirs here. Wheaton North season is over. They have 2 wins on the season. It's kind of funny how both Wheatons end at the same time, one hosting and one ending at Nashville. So congratulations to both Wheatons in that respect. And then, yeah, Franklin Central girls groups beating Tupelo. It's not surprising, but Tupelo is a really good girls group. And I've only heard great things from them. And talking to Bradley Davis a few days ago, and he was harping on them a little bit and giving them a lot of props. And then Franklin Central comes out and ends up besting them. So tight competition, despite only there being like 3 huge groups there, but overall 3 amazing programs.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple of things. Number one, shout out HOA for number one, just a great social media presence. I was seeing photos from the event all throughout the day. Then number 2, they do commentary on their live streams, which is incredibly hard to pull off production wise. So props to them. I think Hannah Johnson was, I wasn't watching it all because I was just trying to stay alive on Saturday. So, but I think Hannah Johnson was on there. I don't know who else was on there this past week, but speaking of Bradley Davis, he and Braxton Carr are hosting HOA Orlando this weekend.
Ooh, that's going to be
a killer panel. Not in our comps of the week, but still a good event nonetheless. And then also a quick shout out to Greenfield Central Legacy out of Indiana. Apparently they're doing a Rocky themed show this year with a boxing ring on stage with like the ropes and stuff.
Oh, yes.
I'm like, that is incredible. Of all the novelty show choir themes I've seen, that is not one of them.
Twinsburg did something like that a few years ago where they had their own makeshift boxing range.
Fairfield
in general,
when Fairfield had a men's group, they did too.
Oh, no way. I thought Twinsburg did the baseball show,
They did
or did they also do?
too, bro. If you look at all of them, I know you know some of them. You know the Sesame Street show, the baseball show. They had a
Okay.
boxing show. Was Randy's like last year, I believe, was
Okay.
the boxing show. I don't know. But it was a good show nevertheless.
Yeah.
I saw it at Wheaton actually.
Good deal. And then our final comp that we're going to recap in pretty big detail is the Tift County Peach State Invitational. So this one, no finals. So in large mix, Brandon Brio coming home first with best vocals and best choreography. Oak Mountain Singers second with best overall effect. Oak Grove center stage in third. And then in small mixed, Appling County Applause taking home a sweep in that division. Tarpon Springs Syndicated Sound in second, and Rome Grand Finale in third. And then in the women's division, Brandon Bella's first vocals and choreo, Oak Mountain the Muses second, and overall effect. This one, I will start off the discussion here. A little bit of an underwhelming field. We had a couple of late drops. Albertville dropped out, and then I believe Appling County dropped down to small mixed. So that really only left 3 choirs in the large mixed division, or maybe Opelika bailed out too. I don't know.
Maybe.
But anyways, and then Tallahassee also pulled out their 3 choirs. So a little bit of a smaller Peach State Invitational field than we have perhaps seen in years past. And then I just want to touch on the big obvious story here, which is Brandon. They won the large mix, they won the women's, and they also took the top 2 spots in the middle school division. So Brandon took a 4-for-4 this weekend at Tift County. Ethan, besides for Brandon winning everything, what else can we learn from Peach State?
So you and I had the conversation a little back in the Q&A. We were like, let's name the top 3 South groups. And you and I had the conversation of, does Oak Mountain deserve to be in that conversation over some other choirs? And you and I kind of went back and forth on it. And this competition, I mean, it kind of like made sure what we said was true. I mean, I put Brio, and they came out and showed this competition. Oak Mountain, of course, is still having an amazing year. And to see them get best overall effect is great. They have the challenge of going up north and going up against Center Grove, I believe. Yeah. And that's a tough battle right now. So that's amazing. I think Bella's girls beating Oak Mountain is also huge. And I know we'll touch on that a little more. But Oak Mountain girls was probably top 5 girls group in the country at this point. There's some I feel like I've been tuning into girls groups or just single gender maybe more than large mix this season. It feels like I feel like I've been more ready to see those results than the large mixed ones, because it's so tight all across the nation right now. And this result shows how tight it is. Brandon Bellis came out and showed. Bounce back for Brio. It must feel really nice to end up on top at the end of your season. So congratulations, Brio, and Oak Mountain has a tough road ahead, but we'll see how they can do.
Adam, what do you got?
Well, it looks like the division drop worked out nicely for Appling County. I definitely do. I think there's something to be said about Bella's bringing that win. I think that is, of any of these divisions, the biggest, I think the biggest triumph for a group there this weekend, and most certainly for Brandon too, who's just had a lot of tough groups this season, right? And like you said, week 1 doesn't define a season, but it most certainly was something that that took a little to grow from, right? And we've seen them come out with some really tremendous accomplishments. Visuals up at Chesterton, couple wins over the groups that they had been beat by earlier in the season. And I think this is another really big one for them. As far as South power rankings go, you can find those on our website. They're tremendous. But I think this was one of the really tight rankings here. And I think that this sheds some light on how momentous this battle must have been to watch in person. Love both programs, and I'm sure it was quite the show.
Absolutely. I just want to finish up the discussion here real quick by saying that I think for both branding groups, this is a pretty classic season of growth. Everybody knows that if you want to beat one of the best programs in the country, you do it at the beginning of the season, and both groups got beat. And then both groups steadily worked throughout the season to the point where right now I think a lot of people would be very tempted to put them in that top 3 Southern groups conversation alongside Clinton and Homewood, and maybe they'd be better than Grenada right now. I think for me, Grenada still holds that 3rd spot in the South, Ethan.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of where Brandon's at, Adam's right. Oak Mountain was 4th and Brandon was 5th in our large mixed poll rankings heading into this. Wouldn't be surprised to see that flipped. Oak Mountain, though, they will go up to nationals. They will bring Grenada and Jackson Academy with them from the South. Where will they place? I don't know. I mean, they're singers are going straight away in the morning. I think they're going at 8 a.m. So that's something to talk about for next week. For now, we just got to sit there and say congrats to Brandon. That's the roundup to Brandon season as well. They are not hosting their show choir elite this year, which I am kind of sad to see. It was an amphitheater competition in Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly why they're not hosting this year, but I have heard that hopefully it will be back for next year. And real quick before we get to our bridge segment, the return of the miscellaneous results lightning round is going to come probably for the last time this year because the season just kind of funnels down. But looking at this past weekend's storylines, number 1, Keller Central competing in Mississippi for the first time in like forever, maybe since South Jones 2005. They took a caption from Petal at Biloxi, so that was a big win for them after not winning in Texas at all this year. Huntington North is now up to 3 wins. They took home the win at Columbia City, heading into ISMA State Small Finals. Sparta Upstage Adrenaline taking home their first ever win at the Craig Spotlight Spectacular. Blue Valley BV Singers took down Avon Accents. They're up to 3 wins this year, and they had no wins before this year. That was at Fame Orlando. Grove City, Touch of Class, and Class Act went 1 and 2 at Hamilton in Ohio. La Cueva Underground from New Mexico took the showmanship caption off of Burbank in Sync at the Heart Encore competition. Pius the 10th Spectrum in Nebraska is up to 3 wins. This year, they beat Omaha South and Elkhorn South at Millard North, so that's a phenomenal season for them. Winfield General Admission and Emerald Elegance went 1-2 at the Sissonville Touch of Class Classic, so we got a couple programs going 1-2 this weekend. And then Bishop Heelan Harmonia Mundi getting in the win column for the first time since 2018 with a split caption win over Grand Island Northwest at Westwood Jubilation. Ethan, 1 or 2, what stands out to you?
Pius really sticks out to me. That's a really good win. Omaha South got their first win of the season after a couple 4th place finishes. So it was super cool to see Pius get their 3rd. I was talking to some Lincoln Southwest kids over the weekend, and they were only telling me good things about them. And it was actually funny because when those final results came out, I was kind of sitting near them, and they were really happy for Pius. And it was kind of cool to see how Nebraska is that tight. So congratulations to Pius on the great win, and congratulations.
Yeah, real quick. I just want to touch on Pius as well. Adam, I promise I'll get to you in a second. I actually wound up for a portion of the day on Saturday sitting right above Pius's choreographer, Braxton Carr, and so I congratulated him on a great season and whatnot. But Pius is a program that, if you look at it before the pandemic, they had 1 win in 2017, and that was it. And then in the last 2 years, they've picked up 4.5 wins. So this is a program that I think is really, really on the rise. I've driven by Pius before, never been inside the school, but I think it's like you said, Ethan, a great group of kids and definitely a new power player in Nebraska. Adam, what do you have?
Yeah. So first I want to touch on La Cueva's caption there. For Burbank, this is a visually really reputable group, a group that consistently has some excellent showmanship or visuals for non-California, as a non-California translation there. But that's a huge caption to grab. So that happened at Heart this past weekend. And the second thing I want to talk about here is Huntington North, which is a small group in, well, we say small. There's a little debate about small or medium, right? But I won't touch on that. But a small group by terms of ISMA in Indianapolis, taking their 3rd win of the season. This is a group that has been really, really fantastic this year. They've tackled some fantastic groups. I believe Avon being one of them. Northridge is a huge win in the small group scene in Indianapolis. So they'll come up to, I think, this next week being their last of the season. but that will be it'll be really interesting to see how they come out at the end. And yeah, definitely worth commending.
Awesome. Just a couple quick notes for me. Number one, being from Wisconsin, I have to shout out Sparta. This is only their second full season in the varsity division. They were a prep choir up until roughly midway through 2022. So to see them get that win, they came super close last year in year number one as varsity group. They finally punched their ticket this year. And so I'm really, really happy for them. And then also I want to shout out Blue Valley. Blue Valley is a school that did not have competitive show choir before the pandemic. And now here we are in 2024, and they have a super nice 3-win season to their name, beating Avon, who I think our panelists had as the 11th or 12th best group in Indiana last week in their poll. That's no small feat. And so a huge congrats to Sam Dollins and the Chamber Singers and everybody over at Blue Valley. I am kind of mad their men's group went away for this year, but if it means that their mixed group picked up 3 wins, I think I can live with that. And then also, like Adam said, La Cueva Underground. This is a group that their performance opportunities come few and far between. And I do believe that Hart is their only competition that they will be going to this year. It's hard being in Albuquerque. And this is a group that rebranded after the pandemic. I believe they were Fifth Avenue before the pandemic, and they're called Underground now. So it's super great to see them maximize their one opportunity that they're going to get this year. I don't think there's much of a better result that you could have asked for besides singing caption off of one of the California Big Three. And then a final note, Bishop Elin, small school in Western Iowa. They kind of get gobbled up in Sioux City by Sioux City East. For them, I think this is a huge win. They've got a super solid director team going throughout their high school and their middle school. So a shout out to that whole program there. All right. We are going to move on to our bridge segment. And so it's the time of year where some circuits are done and some circuits are almost done. And then some like California, New England are kind of sort of only halfway through. So this kind of naturally begs the question every year, when should your season be and how long should your season be? So I think disregarding the whole when should your season be question right now, the bigger question that I think is easier for us to debate is what is the right number of competitions for a group to do? So just for some context for this, we see a lot of big metro area groups. I'm thinking like Indianapolis, Des Moines, maybe Omaha. We see some of those groups compete, the really heavy hitters, only like 4 times a year. Case in point this year, Ankeny Centennial, they were going to compete 4 times. One of their comps got snowed out. They only competed 3 times this year. On the flip side, we've got some smaller schools. I'm especially looking at some of those Indiana groups that perhaps you run 2 competitions in the same day. You compete once in November. You run it all the way out to ISMA. And all of a sudden, you're looking at 7 or 8 competitions. So, Ethan, I'll throw this one to you first. I think number one, how many times did you compete in high school? And number two, if you were running your program, how many times would you compete?
So with Mount Zion, I would usually compete on an average throughout my 4 years, including the COVID year. I would say it was probably around 7 times a year with a national competition on the back end of it, which is something that we kind of enjoyed because you can start off a little bit, try to get your feet under you. And it was kind of nice because then you could hit your stride midway through the year and then try to finish out as strong as you can. And I mean, if I started a program, I feel like I'm biased to that. I'd probably do the same thing. I see why groups do the small or do less competitions, whether it's for budgeting or fundraising and all that stuff, how big their own competition is. There's a lot of factors that go into it, even like your own metro area. So of course, Mount Zion's blessed to be right in the smack of the Midwest and being able to reach all over the place and go into all these different states. So yeah, 7 comps I think is 7 or 6 is about where I like it. Now I have seen like you mentioned those small Indiana groups. Like I remember Austin Dimensions would go to like 9 or 10, something that I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But again, that's only like 2 or 3 more than I would go to. I'm interested to see what you guys think about it because like you can talk about it, but like Clinton only goes to 3 every year, and some people talk about the competitive aspect of that. It's less times that people can get them, and how their streak keeps going. But just to continue the question, Adam, how long do you think a competition season should be?
You're making me nervous there talking about Attaché. Get some people in here, but
No,
no,
I'm
I think it. It's definitely regional, I think, right? And we can talk about when the seasons start and end. And I think the biggest factor there is what are the other important factors or extracurriculars that are big there. So, for example, in states like Iowa and Texas and Indiana, you have a big concert choir scene, whereas in others you might not. So most show choirs in Indiana double as a concert choir. I don't know how that works in some other states, right? But and then for some, not in other places, I guess that might just be an Indiana thing. But you have to look at when other extracurricular activities are happening. When are the athletic seasons at these schools? And for me, I think a happy place is maybe maybe around six, seven competitions. I think that's a happy place for most groups to grow throughout a season and not burn out. I think that's a big thing too. But I'd be curious to know what you think, Will.
Yeah, there are, I think, a number of different factors. And I'll lead into this, Ethan, by bouncing off of one of your comments, what you said about Attaché. And I don't think it's necessarily that Attaché only competes 3 times each year, because they also do host nationals a lot of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And essentially, while you're not competing, it's basically the stress load and the workload is competing, right? You're going out of state. It's a 3-day event, right? So for me, I think it's more so the fact that Clinton does not start until the middle of February, and so that gives you probably about 3 weeks more rehearsal time than most other Southern groups get before they start their season. Now, for me, I'm in a very interesting lived experiences point, because Wisconsin, along with Iowa, is kind of ground zero for the movement of we're going to start our show choir season the very first weekend of January. And for 3 years, I lived that life. The January 5th, I was on the road and I was competing. And so my senior year, my director said, you know what, there's no reason for us to start the very first weekend of January. We're going to wait until the third weekend of January to start competing, because then we can get those extra 2 weeks of rehearsal time. Well, guess what? That competition, the third weekend of January, wound up having 14 groups in the mixed division. We were 13th. And I'm not saying that it's because we hadn't competed before. I'm convinced that nothing would have fixed the issues that we had that year. But it is a very interesting thing, because eventually, at a certain point, you just have to go out and face the competition, right? You can't just hold off competing forever, because then you don't compete, right? Or you miss out on some of those really marquee matchups that you're kind of left wanting, and you would say, oh man, like if we would have been in there with choirs X, Y, and Z from our area, even if it was a little early for us, it would have been a great experience. And so I read Jen Randall's book, The Art of Competitive Show Choir, which if you are an industry professional or you think you want to be an industry professional, it's a phenomenal read. And she recommends at least 3 competitions per year to build up some momentum. And I think that that's the absolute bare minimum. I think, like Adam said, the athletic seasons really do. Oh, look at that.
Oh
Look at
my
that.
gosh.
And
Man.
wow, we're going to have to find Mrs. Randall and get our book signed by her at some point. She was judging at Millard North this week, and otherwise I was kind of hoping to find her at Wheaton. But hey, because I found everyone else at Wheaton, Braxton Carson right below me, saw Ellie Jordan a couple rows above me, But I think for my school, like the start of spring athletics, it was a pretty big cutoff. Our last competition was always the Saturday before spring sport practice started on Monday. And so then you also have to factor in how long you're traveling. Like I had a combined 1 competition within an hour drive my entire 4 years. And so comp days were always a very big, like you're leaving school before 6 a.m. because you got to go 2, 3, 4 hours to get to the place. And then if you make finals and you're not out of there until 11 and you're driving another 2, 3, 4 hours back, you're not back until 2 or 3 a.m., right? But I think if you're in one of those really dense areas and like your longest local competition is 40 or maybe an hour away, and it's not that much of a big day, if it's okay, we can leave school at 9 a.m. You don't have to be at school till 8:30, and you can wake up at a normal time, and you're only back to your own bed at like midnight or maybe 1 a.m. on the latest nights. I think that also factors into it, and you can compete more because it doesn't take as much of a toll. I think Adam's number of 6, I think, is a pretty happy spot for me, because it allows you to sort of do that 1 or 2 early season competition number, and then you can kind of hit your stride in the middle of the season. You can go perhaps 3 straight weeks in the middle of the season if you want. And then it gives you like 1 or 2 off weeks to kind of regroup, reset, and then whether your last competition is one that you're going to be challenged to place as competitively as you need to, or whether it's a smaller competition that your goal is just to win or to dominate the competition really badly, it allows you to rest up a little bit and do that. So I think, Adam, your 6 number is a really good number, and budget notwithstanding, and in a perfect world where I can, compete within an hour of my school regularly, I think that's probably where I would be. Any other closing thoughts before we move on to our previews?
Yeah, one last thing. You brought up something in my mind too, because you had some really good points. You saying the spring sports schedule, I forgot who mentioned that, but that is also just like a huge thing for what I had to go through as well. And of course, I know a lot of shows like to end on have senior nights, and they love to have their spring shows. So it kind of matters where that can all fit in. And of course, for seniors, that's just the madness of the end of the year schedules. So much going on. So I think that's another thing that a lot of choirs have to put in the back of their head when they're making their schedules.
Yeah, for sure. Adam, anything else, or are we moving on to previews?
No, I'm happy with what you said.
All right, there we go. So to anybody who wants to direct a show choir program, all things being perfect, compete 6 times in a year. That's the official homeroom show choir opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to head out to Massachusetts to the Andover, New England Show Choir Showdown, or the NESCS. NESCS is how I see it abbreviated everywhere. I don't know how you say that. In the large mixed division, we've got the Lowell Sound Impressions, Cosby Spotlight, Daniel Hand Vibe, Auburn Varsity Singers, Shepherd Hill Fantasy, South Windsor Choral Spectrum, Tatasqua Encore, and Waltham Music Unlimited. For New England standards, this 8-choir large mixed division is pretty much as large as you're going to get. Ethan, what's your immediate read on this?
So Andover always seems to pull. It's at the point of the year where it's later for a bunch of choirs, so it's kind of like a destination spot for a lot of choirs for the end-of-year trips, and they always seem to pull in their locals as well as a lot of out-of-state groups. I think they do a fantastic job in that. I've had the opportunity to go to Andover, and we had a great time there, and it was us and a bunch of out-of-state choirs, but we also got to see Daniel Hand and Waltham, which was super cool because you don't usually see them anywhere else. But the first thing I saw when I looked at this lineup, I was like, Auburn? I was like, I don't know an Auburn in the Northeast. And I was like, wait a minute. Their season's still going? It's been almost a month since I think they performed or something like that. So it was kind of surprising to see them in this lineup. But so they've had some time to perfect their craft a little bit, or they could come out and be a little rusty was kind of how I saw it. But again, I know they'll probably have a great trip in Boston or New York, wherever they're going. Yeah, and then for the locals, we have another big matchup between the big two, Daniel Hand and Waltham. Waltham just bested Daniel Hand, which kind of ruined everything I knew beforehand about the Northeast, because I thought Daniel Hand had its grasp on the region a little bit. So coming into this competition, there's a lot of unknowns. You have your out-of-state groups, you have your locals. But if I had to take a shot at it, I think Daniel Hand's going to come out as a get-back comp, a really big bounce back, end up with a GC. I think Auburn is still a really good choir. I just don't know how much it's going to translate to the region itself. It's always hard to get a read on it, but I have them in the second spot. Waltham in the third. I know it's surprising to some people, but again, Auburn is a very great choir. I think they had a really good win over Daniel Hand. It must have been tight from what I've heard, but I have them in the third. Crosby's, I have him in the fourth. I'm going to go Windsor? South Windsor? Yes. And then I'm going to close it out with Lowell. I think Lowell will close it out for the mixed.
All right, Adam, what do you have?
All righty. Nothing too different. I'll defer a little bit, though. I actually, this is probably my least confident of my predictions tonight. But I think Auburn drives up, and I think they win it all. I think they take both captions. You got some fantastic Dominic Mataz choreography. You've got some strong Southern vocals. And I'll favor him to win this one. I'll give that second place spot to Waltham. And I think that's just because I like an underdog. And I'll put Daniel Hand right below him. Now, here's where things are controversial. I got Cosby in the 4, but it's worth pointing out that Cosby has a pretty long-running undefeated streak. I want to say 5, maybe 6. I think putting them in the 4 is a little weird feeling for me. But that's just at least my, I could be very wrong about it, but that's my read on what the Virginia circuit looks like compared to the New England circuit this year. And I think that might just, I could be dead wrong, but I like to be right. So I'll give that fifth spot to South Windsor, and the sixth to Shepherd Hill, which is a group that's had a pretty solid running this season. So that's how I feel. Will, give it to us. How wrong are we?
Of all the areas of show choir in this country, I would say that New England is probably, besides California, one of the areas that I'm weakest on in terms of determining where choirs are at. So I'm going to throw out here is that this is just simply such a chaotic competition. Having two really phenomenal out-of-state groups would be enough, but then you throw in the fact that South Windsor and Shepherd Hill have both only competed once so far this year, that this is only their second competition against some of these groups that have gone 3, 4, and maybe however many times so far already. And it's just going to be awful for me in terms of predicting it on Comps of the Week. Not awful in terms of what the quality of what goes on stage. All I'm going to throw out here is that I'm just super hyped for the small mixed Division 2. We've got a really robust 6-choir small mixed division. We've got Dracket coming back for the first time since before the pandemic. And we've also got New England School of the Arts performing, which I believe is the first competitive high school show choir ever from New Hampshire. So just this year, we've got the first one in a while from New Jersey and perhaps the first one ever from New Hampshire. So New England, while the scene was hit really, really hard by COVID, I'm really glad to see that hopefully we're starting to get back to the absolutely loaded comps like this where we have new groups joining and things like that. We've got 21 groups on Saturday. So that's a stacked lineup wherever you go. We are going to head a little bit south and a little bit west now to the Marysville Showcase. In large mixed here, we've got Carroll, Beaver Creek, North Central, Olentangy, and Petal. In middle mixed, we've got Peoria, Ross, Winfield, and Norwell. And then in women's, we've got Olentangy, Winfield, Norwell, North Central, Carroll, and Petal. We've got groups from 5 different states here: Ohio, Indiana, West Virginia, Illinois, and Mississippi. Adam, I'll start with you. Who wins?
So I'll start this by saying I'm going to favor North Central for both captions, and it's because I think that out of all the groups, at least for Indiana, but arguably in the region, this is one of the groups that's taken a big, big step up from last year. And this group this year, they sing, they dance, they do it all. And they've had some really, really impressive wins and little cheeky caption snags, as you might have seen from a week or two ago at Loft Jeff in northwestern Indiana. But I'll favor them for the 1. I'll give Petal the 2. They'll be close behind with some fantastic Lexi choreo. At the 3, I'll give it to Carroll. 4, Olentangy. 5, Beaver Creek. And rounding it out with the 6, it'll be close, but I'm going to give it to Winfield. This is a super, super fun show design that I had the privilege of seeing live when they traveled to Indiana a couple weeks ago. And they also have some really, really nice, they have some nice choreo, they have some cool costume design, and some pretty solid vocals. So I think that's a group that I would love to see in finals this weekend. How about you guys?
Well, we've only got 5 finalist spots, so
that's embarrassing for me. I didn't say any of that.
That's okay. Perhaps
at least you guys know I like them.
That's all right. Ethan, what do you got?
So North Central was actually last week able to get away from some of the bigger choirs in the area, and they were able to pick up a win. And here they're kind of doing the same thing. And I think it's going to go with the North Central W again. I think they're a really strong choir, vocally and choreography. Yeah, I think they're going to take the top spot, but I just want everyone to know every time I count out Petal, they always seem to burn me. So yeah, I would fade me probably because putting them in second feels wrong because they always hurt me in some way or form because they're so great, and I always put them in the 2 spot, it feels like. But I'm gonna go with Olentangy in the 3. I think that's kind of a surprise, but I think they're a really solid choir. I think they've lost I feel like they started fading a little bit in the past couple of competitions, but they did start off really strong. I think they might bounce back here and kind of maybe even surprise Carroll a little bit. I know they just had a great competition a little bit ago. So Carroll in the 4, and I think Beaver Creek rounds out in the 5.
All right. I'm just going to vehemently disagree with you when you say that North Central is getting away at this competition. While it's not in Indiana, that's probably what you meant. I think that this is kind of the exact opposite of getting away because you run into Olentangy, you run into Petal, you run into Carroll, So I don't think that this is North Central getting away by any means.
Well, not
I
getting
think
away, just from the groups that are in Indianapolis, at least. I know Olentangy and Carroll are there, but of course, like the big three at
Yeah,
least.
pedal.
that's fair. In terms of my large mixed finals predictions, I'll take North Central with 2 captions and the top spot. Then Carroll at the 2, Olentangy at the 3, Petal at the 4, and Beaver Creek at the 5. Middle mixed, I don't expect any of these groups to make finals, but it's just going to be such a chaotic division. You've got groups from states. You've got Peoria, and hopefully their dudes don't throw up again.
Oh my God, don't.
And I'm not going to say anything more about that. And then we got Ross, who's coming off a super solid small mix finals placement last weekend. Winfield from West Virginia, who it seems like there's a large choir there at times. They won this past weekend overall at Sissonville. And then Norwell, who is not a large choir by any means, but a very good choir. 3 women's finalists as well. Can't wait to see how this one rounds out. We're going to keep making our way west, and we're going to go to the ISMA Large School State Finals. We're not here to talk ISMA politics. We're here to talk ISMA preview. So in the mixed division is Lawrence Central, Central Sound, Fishers, Electrum, Franklin Community Heritage Singers, Castle Night Sensations, Plainfield Ballet Bow, Lawrence North Legacy, Decatur Central Goldenaires, Avon Accents, and the Pike. Oh, I should have listened. Encores. I knew their women's group was the Mystiques, but the Pike Encore. All right. This one features nobody in our Indiana top 5, but a lot of groups right outside that. Looking at you, Plainfield, Fishers, Avon, both Lawrences. I think Castle has made brief appearances in our rankings at some point this year. I think Franklin Com, I think their women's group has. Adam, I'll just lead you off with this. I know you're competing, but so if you want to kind of tiptoe around this one, that's great. But what can you say about this?
Well, I'll give it this. It's a real battle for the vocal caption. If you take a look, the schedule was just released the other day. Avon has a tremendous spot, and they're coming off of a tough loss last weekend. So I think this is a group that has some great vocal chops, and I think could really come in and surprise some people. I'll favor Plainfield for the choreo, and I'll I'll leave the top 3 groups. I won't make a prediction for them. But I think at the next part of the pack there, you've got LC and LN, the Lawrence groups, Castle, Pike, Decatur Central, and FCOM rounding it out. Again, there's a lot of talk about what ISMA State will be this year and what that's going to look like. But one thing's for certain, Fisher Sound will sweep the women's division, and they will be fierce. Oh, also, congrats to Westfield's group in their show choir debut this year for making state finals and having a pretty solid season overall.
Absolutely. Ethan, what do you got?
So really quick, I know it's not our comps of the week, but I'm really interested to see the small as well. I think that's going to be really cool to see how that plays out. Just looking at this, it's going to be tough because I thought Fishers was going to bounce back a few weeks ago. They were unable to pick up a win when I thought they were going to pick up a win because they've always gone up against some really big choirs in the Indianapolis area. Brownsburg, I think, ended up besting them wherever they went. Looking at this, I don't feel confident in really giving a prediction besides maybe like the top 2 because I think all these choirs are equally fantastic in their own right. I know our Indianapolis guys talk about all the time, like this is almost a completely different area of show choir sometimes because they are all their own entity and they're all so good in what they do. So I'll leave the predictions up to you, Will, because I know you're opinionated and I know you know these choirs maybe a little better than I do. But I just want to say shout out to Plainfield. Fishers, I don't think they're going to win it, but I think they're a really good choir. And I think they have a good chance to make some noise. As always, I like Fishers. I've been there before. They always have some nice people over there at their school. Great program. Lawrence North is interesting. I think they have a real good shot to make some noise here as well. And of course, but I think Avon might take the cake for me personally. And that's just kind of where I'm sitting at on ISMA.
All right. So ISMA, I think they usually announce 4 placements. I'll go down all 9 for the mixed. Women's, I'll be way out of my depth. But in terms of the mixed, I'll take Plainfield in 2 captions for the win. I'll take Fishers at the 2. I'll take Lawrence Central at the 3, Lawrence North at the 4, Castle at the 5, Avon at the 6, and then I think Franklin Community at 7, Pike at 8, and Decatur Central at 9. Women's, I know Fisher Sound is going to win, and that's that. Our last competition is the Mitchell Show Choir Classic. We're just going to cut that conversation right there. Fisher Sound, that's all you need to know. In the large mixed division, we've got Aberdeen Central, Eagle Express, Millard West, West in the Groove, Omaha South, the Ambassadors, Bishop Heelan, Harmonia Mundi, Sioux City East, the headliners, and then in small mixed, Hot Springs, Groton, and Vermilion, all South Dakota choirs. And then in the women's division, we've got Aberdeen Central Special Request, Millard West Uptown, Omaha South Amplify, Bishop Heelan Magnifique, and Sioux City East Prestige. And then in the men's division, we've got Bishop Heelan Momentum and Sioux City East Entourage. Ethan, we started in Massachusetts. We're now all the way west in South Dakota. Final stop in our show choir journey for the week. Who wins?
First off, you did a great job of setting that, going almost state by state there. So congrats to Will on the sheet there. Who wins? I think Millard West wins. They have a fantastic choir, a great show. I was actually able to see them live, and it's always great to see them live. Second, I think I'm going to go Aberdeen because they just came off a win, and I think they're a really strong choir. I just don't think, even though Omaha South did win recently, I don't think that they're going to be able to take one of those top 2 spots. I'm going to put them in the 3, and then the headliners are always a strong choir, and I know Bishop Heelan also made some noise this past weekend, but I do think they're going to round it out for the Tier 1. And that's what I think on Mitchell. And also, we'll talk about Mitchell later, but if you haven't seen Mitchell's show, go see Mitchell's show.
Adam, what are your thoughts?
Remind me, is this 6 finalists?
This is 6 overall finalists, yep.
Gotcha. I'll give it to Millard West as well. West in the Groove is a group that is consistently great in the Nebraska scene. I would not be surprised to see them take both captions here, and I think Aberdeen Central will be close behind, another group that's made a lot of noise here, despite competing small division most of their competitions. Omaha South, I'll put in the 3 with Sioux City East and Bishop Heelan right behind. There's a lot of discussion around what that 4-5 will look like. Will Sioux City East pull it out? And I think they will. Again, we'll be close to Bishop Heelan, which will be your big Sioux City competition there. And I'm going to give the 6th spot to Vermilion, which is a group that has not seen a lot of time in the limelight this year, but is a group that I consistently see going out and out and out. And I think that they'll pull out a lot of growth from the end of their season, and I think they'll make finals.
All right, well, I've got 1 minute left to round out this show. This is not the biggest field numbers-wise, but quality-wise, all 5 of these large mixed groups have won at least one competition this year. I think it's a phenomenal field. The Classic always draws super-duper well. It's a traditional end-of-season competition. And we've only got one South Dakota group in the large mixed field. So it's a super interesting dynamic here. I think ultimately I'll give this to Millard West. I feel like for a guy who has never been a director and is not going to school to become a director, I feel like Ethan has the most show choir stories out of anyone I've ever met. And we're just going to have to run a few episodes called Ethan's Show Choir Stories because, back when I was at Andover in 2018, back when I saw Millard West earlier this year at Troy, and back when I was at Twinsburg, they had the best concessions.
Yeah, we need to make a wheel, and we'll spin it, and whatever it lands on, that's what it would be.
And back when I was at Show Choir Nationals and saw Clinton live, and this and that and the other thing, and oh my goodness. But anyways, I'll give it to Millard West at the top. I'll go Aberdeen Central at the 2, and this is where things get super duper interesting. I talked about Sioux City East being a streaky choir at the start of the season. They've been super duper streaky this year. No idea where they're going to place one weekend to the next. So I'll actually give the 3 to Millard West Uptown, and then I'll give the 4 to Omaha South, 5 to Sioux City East, and 6 to Bishop Heelan. I saw Vermilion at Totino Grace a couple weeks ago. Great show for a school with 400 and whatever kids that their high school has. They had some phenomenal soloists and tons of guys, but I ultimately don't think that it'll be enough to surpass Millard West Uptown. And also realize on those men's division results because it's rare that you see a dedicated men's division so far out there. All right, this is the end of this show.
Whew.
We got one show coming up right after this one, so we'll end the stream and we'll start another one. So Adam, thank you very much for joining us again this week. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Adam.
If you're not here at the start of the show, just a reminder that this will be on Spotify and YouTube probably later tonight, maybe tomorrow, but probably later tonight. So if you want to stick around for a Wheaton Warrenville South recap, we will see you right on the other side. See you guys.
Peace.